Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be unboxing this little regulator from Strideways Worldwide. It's a single stage regulator. We'll have a look at the packaging, we'll unbox it, we'll have a look at the design as well. I'll show you how to set it up on a canister and I'll give you a few different options for that. And we'll also look at this little tiny diffuser that they've sent me from Twinstar. And we'll have a look at that on one of my tanks as well. So let's have a look at the packaging here. We've got the Strideways logo right here. You have a little picture of the regulator itself. It's called the Pro CO2 Regulator. On the back it gives you a bit of instructions about it's a single gauge pressure reducer, and it has all the what you'll find inside, basically all the bits and bobs. On the side I noticed there was something else here. It says high precision needle valve, smooth adjustments, low power consumption, solenoid. It says a minimalist design, simple to use, which is that's always a good thing. And it says it has a 3-year warranty, which is pretty decent, and it gives you some dimensions of the product itself. If you want to have a look at that, it's 14 centimeters tall and 66 centimeters in width. 6.6 centimeters in width. I was thinking there for a second that might be a mistake. It was my mistake. So take the outer sleeve off, this little brown box inside. Let's have a look. So we've got a little instruction manual. That'll probably come in handy. I should probably read this one because it's a new product. I haven't used one of these before. That's really cool. You get a little wrench. So usually, I'll have to grab mine. Usually you get one of these wrenches and you have to buy this separately. They're not expensive, but it's nice that they include a little simple wrench inside, so you don't have to bother about that. I think when I'm trying to tell people how to set up their own regulator, and they're trying to do it last minute, they've bought the regulator, everything comes in the post, and they then say, right, how do I connect this? And then I say, you need one of these. It's always a last minute scramble to go to the store and pick one up, but it's really nice that the Strideways have included one of these inside the box, I think. Let's have a look at the regulator itself. Inside the box here we have the regulator. So we have the dial here that will show you how much pressure. It's obviously the working pressure, I would believe. And then obviously you have your working pressure knob at the top here. That is really, really nice and smooth. I must be honest, it feels really good. It feels really, really good. Yeah, and then you have your little dial at the side here, which is your needle valve. This will obviously adjust the amount of bubbles coming out the bubble counter and give you an indication to how much CO2 you're putting into the tank. On the side here, you have your solenoid. Nothing really interesting to say about it, although we do have a USB power supply, which is really neat. A lot of people recently have been looking for USB powered appliances, because when you buy your smart plugs or your smart plug or power strip, you get these little USB sections at one side of them normally, and they're always kind of left open and you don't really have a use for them. But it'd be kind of cool if more of our products were, we had the ability to use little tiny USBs, because that would it would get more space on the power strips, basically, and make use of them. But to add on to that, we do have a little power brick here. It's like EU power brick, so for me living in the UK, I will need to add a little adapter to that. But as you can see, you got the USB slot on the bottom there. Obviously this little power light there to tell you it's on. So let's set that to one side. What else we have in the box here? We have the bubble counter itself in a little bit of packaging so it doesn't break, that's good. Let's have a look at this. So basically the bubble counter will just sit on top of the regulator right here. We'll just screw that on right now. There we go. So that's the bubble counter right on there. And obviously your tubing, you would lift this little bit here. You would put this little bit onto the tubing, and then you put your tubing onto there, and then screw it down tight, and remember to fill your bubble counter with liquid. So by doing this, you would just remove this top section here, put some water in here, RO water, tap water. Doesn't really matter too much. Some people use some type of oil. Although I would just say, you know, simple water works perfectly fine. While we're here, I've just noticed this thing rotates, and the bubble counter seems to rotate. That's kind of a neat thing actually, because some regulators, which we'll look at them in a second, you might actually need to have the regulator on its side. And with the ability to move this up and around any way direction you want, that's really, really helpful. That's everything in the box. Let's have a look at setting this up onto one of the canisters. So when it comes to canisters, you have a couple different options. Let's talk through them. You can obviously use a simple CO2 canister. You can get it refilled at places like breweries. You can get it refilled at places like paintball shops. But this one right here is obviously you can see what it is. It's a fire extinguisher. In the UK, a lot of people use this, and it works really, really well. The only thing you need to consider is you'll need a zip tie for when you remove the pin. You need to keep this section closed, so you'll need to put a zip tie or something around it to hold it in place. But this works really, really good, and I use this on all my tanks. But I did used to use a soda stream canister. This one won't really stay upright, so you need something to lean it against. And there is a flaw to using one of these, or even using something like a paintball canister, because for both the paintball canisters and the soda stream canisters, you will need an adapter as shown on the top right here. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to show you how to attach it to this, because this is much lighter than the fire extinguisher. So let's get our regulator right here. Just have it switched off, don't have it plugged in. This valve right here, your working pressure knob, I would probably put it somewhere in between halfway open, halfway closed. It gives you a little work room, a little bit of wiggle room to play with when you need to. So for example, that we're talking about this movable bubble counter, which isn't on every product I've seen. So it's really neat because when you have it on here, you'll be able to adjust this bubble counter to where you want it. Some canisters, if you had a canister and this adapter wasn't here, you might have to put it straight up and down. So if you had it like that, you'd be able to move the bubble counter upwards. I think it's a great little neat thing to add to a product like this. So thumbs up for that. So anyway, we'll attach this right here. So first of all, you'll take this, you'll take your regulator, you'll take your canister, and you will just finger tighten this nut to the regulator. Once it's tightened with your hands, you will then take your wrench, which is this right here, and you will tighten this to a snug fit. There's no need to start really going at it and breaking the thread, but make sure it's a snug tight so that the gas cannot escape. For starters, you can actually move this solenoid out of the way if you need to get into use the wrench. So once you've connected your regulator, obviously move your bubble counter into the right position. You can fill up this bubble counter with a little bit of liquid. Make sure your your needle valve is closed before you obviously put power to this. But before we do so, you will release the pressure from the canister into the regulator. You're going to hear a slight click or a little bit of a pressure noise when you do so. So let's do that right now. Once you've released the pressure from the canister into the regulator itself, you can then adjust the working pressure dial, this big knob on the side here. You want to be adjusting it. MPa stands for megapascals. On other regulators, you might see things such as bar or PSI. Normally we'd be aiming for about 30 PSI for most diffusers, sorry. But 30 PSI would translate into about 0.2 megapascal. So obviously for this one right here, you would adjust the working pressure knob to 0.2 if you can, and that would be you reset. So just make sure you put some water in the bubble counter here, and you would then adjust your needle valve to suit. When we're talking about our bubble counter and how much CO2 we're adding into our tank, I have a few tips and a bit of advice for doing so. So first of all, when we're talking about the bubble counter, we're only talking about bubbles per second, and that really means how much CO2 roughly is coming out of our regulator. It doesn't mean how much CO2 is in our tank or in our water. So what we really want to be doing is we want to be buying something called a drop checker and a drop checker solution to go into the drop checker. And what this is you'll put this in your tank and you will check it, and it will be different colors. So it will be blue if there's not enough CO2 in the water. It will be green or light green if there is enough CO2 in the water at a good level. And it will be kind of yellow when there is too much CO2 in the water. So what we want to be doing really ideally is aiming for a light green color. And when we're also talking about CO2 and we're plugging it into the wall, I recommend using, obviously we've got a solenoid on here which will turn it off and on when the power is on and off and on I mean. So what I recommend is buying a smart plug or a digital timer or a mechanical plug timer, and starting your cycle depending on what your lighting is. So say if we have a 6 hour to an 8 hour lighting period, it doesn't really matter what lighting period you have, as long as your CO2 is a good level when your lights turn on. So to do so, I personally turn on my CO2 2 hours before my lights turn on. And then what I'll do, I'll turn my CO2 off 1 hour before my lights turn off. What this does is, the 2 hours that my CO2 is pumping in my tank when the lights are off, before the lights turn on, it gets the CO2 up to a good level so that plants can use the CO2 as soon as the lights turn on. And that's really, really important. What I do is that when I turn off my CO2 1 hour before my lights, there's a couple factors, but really you're just saving a bit of CO2, and there's generally enough CO2 in the water for that last hour. So that's what I do, and I highly recommend that you definitely get a plug. Running CO2 24/7 isn't really the ideal scenario. It's maybe not best practice, so definitely recommend putting your lights on a timer and putting the CO2 on a timer and balancing it that way. And for the last thing to look at is this little diffuser, the Twinstar diffuser. I've set it up in one of my tanks, and as you can see, it's producing tiny little bubbles, and that is going all over the tank and hitting all the plants, so it's working perfectly. And it's a nice little design. It's a bit different to other designs in the market, although quite similar to some, but there is some different characteristics and in the way that it plugs onto the glass, and its profile is a wee bit different. But yeah, I'm very, very impressed with it. It's very good. And the regulator as well, when we're talking about the Strideways regulator, it seems to be built very, very nice. It is a single stage regulator, so it may not be as maybe stable as a dual stage, because generally when you have single stage, it seems to dump a little bit of CO2 at the very end very quickly, whereas dual stage seem to mitigate this issue. So do take that into consideration. But if you don't have much space in your cabinet, or if you have a tiny little tank and you need a little tiny diffuser, a little tiny regulator, this might be the one to look at. And I think it does come in at a very, very good price range as well for what it's worth. And with that the 3-year warranty, it's very hard to say no to that. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this little regulator, and also having a look at the diffuser from Twinstar. And maybe you picked up some little tips from me setting it up on one of the canisters here. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye, guys.